In today's episode, I'm going to talk about Assyrian tattoos. Now, what would bring up the issue of Assyrian tattoos? I want to mention I saw this post by Nicholas Algilo, probably from several years ago, where he's complaining because he's supposed to be this big expert on all things Assyrian, Assyrian language, Assyrian writing, calligraphy, and all that. And people are contacting him. It's like they want, what do they want from him? All this education on the history of the Assyrian people. And the language. When he wrote this book, Nicholas Algilo is the author of this book, Modern Aramaic, by Nicholas Aude and Nicholas Algilo, and it's how to learn modern Assyrian Aramaic. So people are asking him as an expert on the language and all things Assyrian. They come to him for questions. What do they want? They want a tattoo. And I was like, could you write up this tattoo for me? And he's like, look, I'm a scholar. I'm not a tattoo artist. So bug off after a while. If you have a serious academic question, or if you're trying to enrich yourself culturally with knowledge, you can talk to me. If you want something that's superficial and nonsensical and asinine as a tattoo, I'm sorry, I'm busy. Now, I do appreciate the work of Nicholas Algilo. I had a kind of a disagreement with him, because the answer for the Assyrian people is through Jesus Christ. Through Christ, the Assyrian people will conquer. Not through the pagan gods of old, not through other aspects of cultural identity, but through Christ is our hope, and Christ is our victory. And we have certain Assyrians that are a small minority, but are ridiculing that, casting aspersions on the name of Christ and on leaders of the church who might not be perfect, but should show some respect. So, tattoos. Why are tattoos and Assyrian tattoos important? Now, also, the controversy of Nicholas Algilo and others is pagan imagery or iconography on the so-called Assyrian national flag, which is around 50 years old. And there were prior Assyrian flags. And the first flags, which I like, of course, you go back, King Abgar himself designed a flag, the holy image of Edessa, and it had emblazoned on it, it said, Christ the God, he that believes in thee shall not be ashamed. And then when we have Agaputros, he had a flag of the cross, exalting the cross of Jesus Christ. And that was their battle flag, the Assyrian people, during the horrors of World War I. But we have this new Assyrian flag, and people are putting the images of pagan gods on it, which I think doesn't represent properly Assyrian identity or even history. So we had this little argument about that. One of the earliest Assyrian flags had no religious iconography on it whatsoever, and what it symbolized was the unity of the three Syrian or Aramaic peoples: the Assyrians, the Chaldeans, and the Syrian Orthodox. It's like, let's unite together as one Aramaic-speaking peoples. It's better if we unite, put aside our differences, unite for common cause. But of course, that didn't happen. It would be in the interest of all Aramaic people to unite. So this is a pan-Aramaic, a pan-Assyrian flag. But that, like I said, that flag has fallen into disuse. That's the complaint that people have. It's like, well, we don't want to have I think they're wrong. Like I said, the Assyrian identity is a Christian identity, and that should be affirmed. It should be just embraced and accepted. Like I said, Christ is the final hope of the Assyrian people. God says that Assyrians are going to be given a national homeland, and what seems impossible to men is possible to God. And it's going to happen. And these wicked pagan gods, this is kind of funny. So we've got Nicholas Algilo and Fred Opram, other people who are espousing the worship of the dark, wicked pagan gods. And so you have Julian Samosata was describing just the depraved, wicked rituals in one of the major Assyrian temples, a temple that was built by the Assyrians. And Julian Samosata is writing in the early to mid 2nd century. And in this writing, he says, this is how I grew up seeing these practices, which included men emasculating themselves in a religious ceremony, cutting off their penises and actually holding their severed penis in their hand just gushing blood as they ran around through the village, and then they randomly threw their penis into a house, and they go in there and they put on women's clothing. We see the same thing with the Roman Emperor Elagabalus, where he was transgendered, and he also had the black stone that he was trying to get the Romans to worship, and it's very possible the black stone of Elagabalus is the same black stone that Muslims venerate to this day. It was probably returned. He had it put in a temple in Rome, but then it was returned to the Middle East and probably found its way to Mecca, where it's still venerated and bowed down to and worshipped by Muslims to this day. So we're going to look at the Syrian Orthodox today, because this is all about a random post by Syrian Orthodox on my Facebook, and this is about this is Syrian Orthodox people, ancient Syrian Orthodox tattoos. And this has been something that I've researched and studied. And it's like, why are tattoos important? Now, I don't have any tattoos. Of course, my body's covered with, got scars all over my knuckles and hands, and recently I busted my face open. I don't think it's very visible, but I got scars all over I have scars all over my body, but I don't have any tattoos. I was raised, my father's like, tattoos are bad. Actually, the Torah says you shouldn't get tattoos. So, it's my religious upbringing is no tattoos. I had a girlfriend who had tattoos. She had a tattoo on her collarbone, the small of her back, and one underneath her waistline. I don't think that, I was talking to this other girl recently, and she's going to get a big tiger tattoo on her back. And it's like, I don't think you should cover your entire body. You're going to look like that Ray Bradbury story, The Illustrated Man. A few tattoos might not be that bad, but if you're totally covered, I think that's not appealing or attractive. I guess a couple of tattoos here and there could be sexy, but once you have too many, I don't think it's very attractive or appealing. But I was raised, no tattoos. Tattoos are bad. In the military, we have a lot of our soldiers get covered with tattoos. It's a common practice, especially for soldiers to get multiple deployments. So we see it in my generation of soldiers being deployed to combat again and again. A lot of these young men are just covered young men are covered with tattoos. And I think we've seen that, like people in the Navy back in the day. If you look at Norman Rockwell paintings, these jokes about Navy people getting tattoos. But there's something very important about these Syrian Orthodox women, and now they're elderly women with their tattoos. This goes back to the mark of Cain. I'll return to that in a minute. Now, these tattoos that Arab people have go back to prehistoric time. Now it's dying off. And when I was in Iraq, and I'm visiting my soldiers, and we have visitation. We're doing detainee ops. We had a prison there. We had Saddam Hussein was kept in that prison, Chemical Ali. I actually it's funny, my first and second deployment, during my first and second deployment, I ran into Tariq Aziz. Now, when I was first there, we captured him, and he wanted a Bible while he's sitting in his cell. So I gave him a Bible. I wrote in Aramaic, in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, to Tariq Aziz. So the second time, I was in the detainee facility, and I was in what we call the CASH, the Combat Army Surgical Hospital, whatever, or a service hospital. It used to be called the MASH. Well, it's kind of a different thing, but it's our Combat Support Hospital, the CASH. And so I'm in this detainee facility, just visiting the soldiers. We had some soldiers who were ill. I turn around, there's Tariq Aziz. I think he had a terminal illness. He finally died, but it's interesting. I ran into him, both my second and my first and second deployment. But anyway, we're doing detainee ops, right? So what's going on in our facility is we captured insurgents, and they're being held in prison. And it's a very interesting mission. We had captured insurgents. They're being held in this detainee facility, this prison, and we had visitation. So this was a duty that our soldiers were on. So I was visiting the soldiers and as a chaplain. And I was watching, and you get the bus, and there's a whole process. They'd come into the base because what's going on is you have someone who's captured by the United States forces engaging in laying a roadside bomb or acts of terrorism of some sort. We've captured them or detaining them, but their family members want to come and visit them while they're awaiting trial or serving their sentence. And you'd see their sisters and their mother and their family members coming to see these terrorists. And I was watching these women, and the elderly women would have these traditional tattoos. Like I said, these tattoos go back thousands of years, over 6,000 years. We're going to talk about the origin of these tattoos. And of course, the young women aren't they're looking more, accepting Western styles. And it's kind of funny. Some of the women are wearing the veil, but sometimes you have this girl's brother is in there for engaging in terrorism, and she's wearing, blue jeans and doesn't have a hijab on, the hijab or burqa or anything like that. And she's just wearing more American or Western styles. So here you see her mother, her grandmother, and some especially the grandmother has this. These are like Bedouin people sometimes, and they have the ancient tattoos. And here you have it. So what I'm saying is we're having a loss of an ancient tradition, So someone posted some photographs and video because there's all these killings of Assyrians, but Tur Abdin and Mor Gabriel Monastery is kind of a little small section in Turkey that didn't fall. So it's still an operating monastery. There's still a community of Syriac Christians in this area in Tur Abdin in Turkey. So surviving enclave, thank God. And I was reading about Kuchanis, and it's like today there's like 30 people there. Turkey should give Kuchanis back. It's not theirs. Shouldn't reward. Of course, Turkey's never been held accountable. And the thing is, this isn't just ancient history. The Turks in Azerbaijan just seized Nagorno-Karabakh and with no consequences. So things are going to change. I was thinking about how God looked down and saw the children of Israel being exploited and persecuted by the Egyptians. He saw, and he liberated the Hebrews, and he punished the Egyptians. And I believe God is going to intervene soon. And there are signs of this happening. I've talked about this more in another video. In this video, we're talking about tattoos. So we have these Syrian Orthodox, and they have a global community just like the Assyrians, and they're visiting this holy site, the site of pilgrimage, Mor Gabriel Monastery and the other monasteries of Tur Abdin. And there's still these women and people around the area who survivors of the ethnic cleansing and genocide still living in the area. So you see this person noticing Syrian Orthodox women visiting the monastery, elderly women with these old tattoos. Now, when I was in Egypt, you see the practice of the Christians having tattoos. What they do in Egypt is you'll put a cross right here. You put a cross here on your wrist. Sometimes here they put a cross. This is the Coptic cross. And on their upper arm near the shoulder, they put Mari Girgis, St. George, Abu Sufyan. I forget the other name of Abu Sufyan. It's just on the tip of my tongue, but it's okay. Doesn't matter. The face of Jesus. So Coptic Christians often will tattoo crosses on their hands, and men and women. Now, the St. George on the upper arm, that's more of a man thing, but women get the crosses on their wrists and hands. Not so much that it's mostly men that get it on their forearm, but women get the cross tattoos too. Now, Ethiopia is part of the Coptic church tradition, and you see the cross on women's foreheads, and then they put these tattoos on their neck. So who's getting these tattoos? I also want to mention, I saw this, studying Egypt from the book I haven't finished yet, on Moses and the Exodus. You had, there's a drawing of a dancing girl, and she's practically naked, and just like a penny on her, in her thigh, I think she had a tattoo of the god Bes. Bes is a dwarf god. I don't really understand. God of protection against evil. And he's a grotesque god. So he's a dwarf, and he's got this hideous grimace on his face. He's sticking his tongue out. His tongue hanging out like Kissed back in the 70s. And he's got his flaccid penis, large penis. It's a grotesque It's like, what's the appeal of that bizarre looking god? But Bess was very popular among the people. So this dancing girl, probably double a prostitute. She has Bess on her hip. They actually found a Yahweh inscription in Sinai. It talks about Yahweh of Teman, and near that inscription you also have pictures that seem to be of Bess, but we don't know. Those are probably inscriptions from different age and time periods, probably hundreds of years apart. But anyway, at that important inscription, archaeological discoveries of inscriptions bearing the name Yahweh, the Lord Jehovah, earlier, maybe sometime later, someone put, like I said, Bess. The kings, they Ra and Osiris and Horus, but this grotesque little dwarf god, a god of protector of women in childbirth, a god of fertility. The girls probably prayed to that god if they wanted to get pregnant. But so you see this Egyptian art with the tattoo. This dancing girl has a tattoo, and they found a mummy of a woman with tattoos. I think they're similar to tattoos that the Berbers and the Arabian Bedouin women have. So what does this matter? So Coptic Christians get crosses and other tattoos on their body. Ethiopian Christians are doing it, and Aramaic Christians, this branch of the Assyrian people, the Syrian Orthodox, are also doing it as well. And this goes back to my book, which I called The Secret of Jabez. And I was listening to Sam Shamoun recently, and the guy's got some issues. So I'm having some problems with Sam Shamoun, but I don't know. He needs to get him. He's very talented and he's effective. He just needs to get himself together, man. He needs to seek help too. He shouldn't air I don't know if his personal problems with his ex-wife. It's not appropriate to be airing those things. You should be trying to glorify God and combat falsehood and error, not air your, personal problems with your ex-wife. And you should be, is that helpful? He has kids. And he's saying things like, I might not be able to see my kids in a while if I say this, but I'm going to do it anyway. You have an obligation to your children. Why would you unnecessarily get your wife upset? I don't understand that. Ex-wife. But anyway, Sam Shamoun, he's got his problems, but he also has some good things he was saying. And he's saying, look at the Bible. The Bible rebukes the Assyrians. It speaks well of the Assyrians, but also rebukes them. And he says, who in the Bible do you think gets the most reproof? It's the Jewish people, the Israelites. God speaks out harshly against the Israelites more than anybody else. But one of the obstacles for some people is the idea that the Jews are God's chosen people. People look at it as God playing favorites. And sometimes the Jewish people look like, this is one of the things that John the Baptist had to deal with. He's preparing the way for Jesus. And John the Baptist says, okay, you think you have Abraham as your father. So the idea is the Jews are like, we're some kind of a privileged people. God chose us through Abraham. It doesn't matter what we do. We're God's chosen people. We're special. We're better than other people. This is the attitude. So John's rebuking that. He says, no, it doesn't matter that Abraham's your father. God could take a stone and make a child of Abraham. You should be a spiritual child of Abraham. You need to repent from your sins. Don't think that Abraham is my father, therefore I can do whatever I want. I'm cool with God because Abraham's my father. John the Baptist saying that's not how it works. And Sam Shamoun said something very important as well. He says the purpose of God choosing the Jewish people wasn't you're a master race, you're better than everybody else. It's like your obligation. The reason why God chose you is to bring the knowledge of God to the whole world, not to keep it to yourself and like, oh, we're better than everybody else. They had a mission. Did they fail? In a sense, they did. But on the other hand, the 12 apostles were all Jewish. They're all of the tribes of Israel, are they not? And they carried the gospel, the furthest points of the world at their time. So through Paul and Peter and Thomas, the Jews did fulfill their destiny. But that's how we should see it, right? The apostles, the apostles of Israel, the 12 disciples of Jesus Christ, they're fulfilling the purpose of Israel and taking the knowledge of God to the whole world. While many Jews think we're going to keep the knowledge of God to ourselves, damn the rest of the world, we hate those people, we're better than them. That not all Jewish people think that way, but that some have, and that causes offense and resentment, right? And that's the source of anti-Semitism. It's like, oh, the Jews, they think they're special, they think they're better than us, they think they have a monopoly on God, right? And sometimes there you can have some Christians, I admit it, evangelical, have like an unhealthy infatuation with all things Israel. It's not necessarily good. You can get a deeper understanding of Christ, understanding his cultural identity, but then they start to transform Israel and Jewish type of idol, actually. And like I said, that's not even the purpose of Israel. But we have this book here. This is called Yahweh Before Israel: Glimpses of the History of the Divine Name. And this is about, I mentioned Yahweh Bidhi, who was a king of Hamath, who was his name is servant of Yahweh. And he seems to be a Syrian Yahweh worshiper. And in the Bible, I didn't even realize this. I read the Bible so many times, and then when I went to Syria, it's like, oh, Elijah came here, Elijah went there. It's like, what are they talking about? But the Bible says that God sent Elijah to minister in the wilderness of Damascus. He went to Lebanon. So, and there's a strong argument to be made that Elijah himself, look at the word Tishbite, could mean a foreigner or stranger. He himself might not have been of Jewish descent. So God had a covenantal purpose. Mostly what the Jewish people were about is bringing the Messiah into the world, to marry a child. In the book of Revelation, John sees a woman in the sky, right? And Protestants look like that and say, well, look at that. So, well, that's Israel. It is Israel. But it's also, what does this woman do? She gives birth to a male child, the Messiah. It's Mary, right? Mary is the personification of Israel. That vision he saw is Israel, but it's also the Virgin Mary, the mother of Christ, right? So the thing about this book, scholars came up with a theory or a hypothesis called the Kenite hypothesis. So in this inscription, we have Pharaoh Amenhotep III, right? And this is his Hebseb temple. Hebseb is a jubilee. When you rule for over 30 years, you perform this ritual to show that you're still strong and vigorous, But it's just a not that many pharaohs lasted that long for a variety of reasons. So to celebrate this jubilee, and this temple is built in Sudan, so it's also showing expanded Egyptian power into Africa. But Pharaoh's boasting about all the different tribes that he defeated, and he claims in here that he defeated the Bedouin, the Sheshu of Yahweh. I have defeated the Sheshu of Yahweh. So you see these columns with conquered people, including the Sheshu of Yahweh. So who are these people? Some people think that this is a reference to the Israelites during the 40 years of wandering in the wilderness, but the majority opinion that these are a tribe of Arabian people who worship Yahweh independently of and earlier than Israel. Yahweh was already known and worshipped among certain Arabian tribes. So, what does that mean? Well, the Kenite hypothesis is this. There's a couple of places in the Torah where God says, to Moses, I'm going to reveal my name to you. Moses, you didn't really know my name. Your people didn't know my name. But my name is Yahweh, Jehovah. So this is a revelation. And in the Torah, God says to Moses, it's like, your forefathers worshiped me as El Shaddai, but my name, that God you worship is El Shaddai, is me, Yahweh. That's my name is Yahweh. So the idea is Jethro. Jethro is called a Kenite, and that's important. The Kenites. I'm talking this. What does this have to do with tattoos? Everything. It has everything to do with tattoos. So the idea is that Moses probably already had a sense of calling. He felt like it was his destiny to deliver his people. That's why he killed the Egyptian. And he obviously was already a spiritual person. So he goes in the wilderness. And it's likely that he was introduced to the worship of Yahweh by Jethro the Kenite. And let's talk about who the Kenites are. We also have Jael the Kenite, Jonadab, who seems to be a Kenite. The reason why I entitled my book The Secret of Jabez, because before the time of the book was written, you had a lot of interest in the prayer of Jabez, which is kind of an obscure verse in the book of Chronicles. You have all these. This guy begat so and so, and so and so begat so and so, and then it mentions Jabez, and Jabez does not belong in the genealogy. He seems to be. He's not. He's a Kenite, apparently. There's reason to believe. Look at other verses. He's not Israelite. He belongs to. Who are the Kenites? The Kenites were an Arabian tribe of Yahweh worshippers who were already in the land of Canaan when Abraham got there. He mentions this is the land of the Amorites, the Girgasites, the Kenites, and also, they play a role throughout the whole Old Testament. Hobab, the brother-in-law of Moses, apparently, it mentions that Jethro's people participated with Joshua in the invasion and conquest of the Holy Land. They settled among them. Saul, he's going to attack the Amalekites. He says, well, let's not attack the Kenites who live among the Amalekites because they're our historic allies. So it seems like knowledge of who Yahweh is was conveyed to Israel, to Moses, through the priests of Yahweh and the tribe of Yahweh, the Kenites. But in Hebrew, it's Cain. So they're trying to obscure this by misspelling it. Kenites or Canaanites. And there's a lot of different theories about Cain, and I'll have to talk to them on other programs. But what I want to talk about on this program that's interesting is the mark of Cain, right? Which are, okay, let's go to the story of Cain and Abel. Cain is kind of special, right? So what happens is he's the firstborn son of man. He's the son of, first human being born. That's very unique and special. It's like Adam and Eve were created by God in a unique way. And I kind of wonder, why was it necessary for Jesus to be born of the Virgin Mary? Because I don't think that it's proper to think of sex, especially sex within marriage, as impure and unholy. That's the kind of the attitude, but we shouldn't look at that way. Sex is something created by God. It's a beautiful. It's how we all got here. But the idea, which is not correct, is that there's something inherently, innately wicked and evil about sexual reproduction, which is absurd. But that's the idea. Is so why is Jesus born of the Virgin? And one of the reasons is it's just he's a second Adam. Adam he wasn't created he's created directly by God, so he has a unique physical creation. So the second Adam, Jesus, also has a unique, special incarnation. But Cain is the firstborn, the first person born through natural means, through sexual procreation. And Eve, it seems like she's ascribing paternity to, she goes, I've gotten a man from Yahweh. Of course, every baby is a gift from Yahweh, but people read too much into that. But it's interesting that she says that after she gives birth to Cain, I have gotten a man from Yahweh. And Cain becomes a farmer. Abel becomes a sheep herder, right? And Cain and Abel both bring offerings. Cain brings from the fruit of the field, his first fruits. There's nothing wrong with a grain offering. It's not sinful in itself. In fact, the law of Moses mandated first fruit offerings. So it's not what Cain gave. It's probably the attitude with which he gave it. Something about it. It's not what was given was displeasing to God, but something else. So God looks down on Cain. He's displeased with Cain's offering. He looks down on Abel, and he's pleased with Abel's offering. It doesn't say why. It just says what happened. And people try to, it's a blood sacrifice. Without the shedding of blood, there is no remission. It doesn't say that. Maybe you're right. That could be a valid interpretation. I'm just saying it doesn't say why God, I have this idea theory. The text doesn't explicitly say that, right? That's your opinion. That's your interpretation. It's good to interpret the Bible. People interpret the Bible all the time. And maybe it's the correct interpretation. I'm just saying that the Bible does not say why exactly. God doesn't say, this is the wrong offering, Cain. No, what Cain is reproved of by the Lord looks at Cain and says, Cain, you do well but don't give in to wrath. Try. Basically, God says, nice effort. It's not proper or correct. Try again. I want you to try again. Don't give in to your basic instincts, Cain. I want you to overcome. Don't give in to wrath or anger, because anger is like a demon crouching at your door and it'll devour you. You can't master your baser instincts, Cain. You can do it. So God reproves Cain, but gives him hope for restoration. He's showing compassion on Cain. Then Cain kills his brother. God's displeased, obviously. What have you done? The blood of your brother. And just like Adam and Eve, when he's caught by God, just like his parents lied. Did you eat of the fruit? Right? Adam and Eve lied. They both lied to God, which God, it's just ridiculous because God knows everything. So Cain also, I don't know am I my brother's keeper? I don't know where my brother is. What have you done, Cain? I know exactly what you did. And his punishment is to become a nomad. You'll become a wanderer on the face of the earth, a nomad. But this is the nomadic life. And the way the Kenites looked at it is God called them to the nomad. That was the way that God had prescribed for them to live, the nomadic life. But God does something else. Cain's like, okay, I'm cursed to be a nomad. I won't have a home because I killed my brother. God could have killed Cain, but he had pity on him, and he punishes him, but he spares his life. And when he deserved to die, God showed mercy to Cain, and it's not really clear why, but he does. Then Cain's afraid. It's like, I've killed my brother. Okay, you've punished me to be a nomad, but people are going to find me, and I'm going to die. They're going to kill me because I killed my brother. This also shows that there are other people besides Cain and Abel at this time this incident happened, right? Cain also takes a wife. So who are these people? The most logical explanation is that Adam and Eve had other children after Cain and Abel. Dozens of other people were born, and perhaps Adam and Eve's children had children. Some people think that Adam and Eve might have been among a group of other early humans, but that's all speculation, right? Sometimes the Bible doesn't. These questions are raised, but not explicitly answered. People have explanations and theories and interpretations. Like I said, these interpretations can be correct, but the Bible doesn't explicitly say. So what happens to Cain, right? It's like, okay, God, you've punished me, but I'm afraid they're going to kill me. Your punishment is not going to be enough. Somebody's going to find me. Oh, you killed Abel. We're going to kill you for what you did. So God says, okay, I'm going to put my mark on you so that when people see this mark, that they will not kill you. And the word for mark in Hebrew is a tau, which is the sign of the cross. Undeserved mercy and compassion, and God's deliverance and protection. So apparently, we don't know what the sign of the cross is. This is also an interpretation or speculative, but the mark is usually the letter tau. And whatever this mark is, probably a cross-like emblem. All right, and there's reasons for believing that. So God puts the sign of the cross, the mark of Cain, on Cain's forehead, lest anyone finding him should kill him. This is a mark of God's going to spare him. So what happened with Cain's descendants is this became a tribal emblem, right? And they would tattoo the mark of Cain. So Cain's descendants God put that mark on Cain, but Cain's descendants, his tribe, would take the pattern of that sign, the mark of Cain, and they'd put it on their bodies. And this is probably the origin of the tattoos. And you see crosses in ancient Arabian tattoos, which go before Islam. And even though a lot of these people converted to Islam, they still tattoo crosses their bodies. Why would they do that when Islam repudiates the cross? Now, Islam is actually a corruption of Arabic culture. Like some of the things Muhammad did, like taking his son's wife, was an outrage to Islam. And what happens is the Quran, Muhammad, I know you didn't want to. I know you really didn't want to sleep with your son's wife. but I wanted you to do it. It's good for you. Allah says this. It's me. I wanted you to do it. I know you didn't want to do it, and I want people to realize the only reason why you did it is because I had you do it. It's like, and I want other people to know it's okay for an adopted son. That's not really your son anyway. We're just going to get rid of adoption because, it's a hot girl, man. I mean, Allah can see that. I mean, it's perfectly understandable. So God has to make apologies for Muhammad's outrageous behavior in the Quran. And some of the things he did, like there's a woman who, a poet, she mocked him and he sends his followers to go and stab her and kill her and killing elderly people. I mean, before Muhammad, you had Arabian empresses and queens. See, that's the thing about when you look at the Ethiopians having these tattoos, right? The Ethiopians, you had the Queen of Sheba, it's in Yemen, but these are Arabian-style people, right? And Sheba expanded into us today, Ethiopia. The Ethiopian language is a Semitic language. The Ethiopian alphabet has its origins in the South Arabian alphabet. So these are, the Ethiopians are a Semitic people. And that's part of these tattoos they have go back to, we're talking about here. We're talking about, this is pre-history. In ancient times, you had the Proto-Semitic. So we have Semitic languages. This is a language family, right? So the earliest attested, the earliest written Semitic language is Akkadian, right? So then we have Aramaic, Northwest Semitic language. They have Canaanite languages like Hebrew. And then we have South Arabian languages. One of the things that I think is significant as well is we should understand that not all Arabs existed after, there are already Arab people before Abraham. All right, the Kenites were an Arabian tribe that existed when they were already a large established tribe when Abraham migrated to the Holy Land. They were already there, according to the Bible. And I've said this before, but people think about Abraham having Isaac and Ishmael. But through Keturah, Abraham had 6 more children. He had 8 children in all. And people look at it, it's like, Ishmael's the wild ass of a man. That's terrible. All the problems in the world come from Ishmael. It's like, to them, that's like saying, to us, we insult them, we call them an ass, right? But it's basically, he's a wild stallion of a man. He's a man's man. He's an outdoors man. He's a hero. He's a fighter. He's a champion. From our point of view, it's like, wild ass of a man sounds awful. But to that culture, there's a certain nobility to it, like a wild stallion, It's kind of a compliment, right? So, Jesus died for the whole world. He died for Arab people. And Abraham had nothing to do with Muhammad. Ishmael had nothing to do. Even if he was descended from there, that's like 2,000, 3,000 years. Why are you blaming Abraham and Ishmael? They're not I guess they're biologically perhaps the progenitor, but they had nothing to do with this system that Muhammad created, right? And to this day, there's still millions of Arabic speakers, anyway, who are not Muslim. So, and we got Arabic. So what scholars have done is they compared all these different Semitic languages. They look at their similarities or look at their differences, look at how languages evolve and change over usage, over centuries. And they're able to reconstruct the Proto-Semitic language. But these tattoos, this is also part of the reason why, because the Arabs, the Assyrians, the Arameans, the Jews all come from the Proto-Semitic people. or they're actually the original Semites, actually. And these tribal customs, and you look at the Kenites in the Bible, it talks about Cain's family, right? And it's like Jubal. These are Kenites. They're the father of musical instruments, the father of the nomadic people, the father of brass making. You know, all these. Not everything the Kenites did was. Some of these things were beneficial to human civilization, livestock and breeding, creation of musical instruments, the nomadic lifestyle, other aspects. So it's like, didn't the Kenites die in the Great Flood? Well, like I said, could there have been another Cain or Cain? That there's Cain number 1 and then Cain 2 after the flood? Well, like I said, a lot of Jewish explanations and interpretations I think are wrong, but there is an interpretation that makes sense to me. The last person mentioned in Cain's genealogy is Naamah. And her name is very similar in meaning to the name Noah. So, and then there could be ancient texts that attested to this that haven't survived. But a rabbinic tradition is that Noah married Naamah, the Kenite woman, and the Kenites were kind of matriarchal in a sense, right? I mean, even Cain's genealogy begins with Eve, right? And Eve naming him. And you have a lot of women's names in prominent Kenites. So it's kind of a matriarchal clan anyway. So Naamah, that being the case, you know, I guess she chose an heir, probably Shem, right, to continue the legacy of Cain. But yeah, if Naamah is a Kenite, she's married to Noah, then that line is, I guess we're all connected to that in a sense, right? But probably Shem was the designated heir to continue the legacy of Cain. And it's like I said, it's not. We look at, I mean, Moses murdered a person, David murdered. We look at Cain, but not necessarily everything he did. Even though, of course, Cain is. When I was a kid, and learning catechism, who's the first man? Adam. Who's the first woman? Eve. Of what were you made? Dust. What does that teach you? To be humble, mindful of death. Who's the first murderer? Cain. Who's the first martyr? Abel. It's funny. I learned these things as a kid, and I memorized the child's Presbyterian. I'm not Presbyterian, but I was raised in the Presbyterian church because I'm not a Calvinist. But that's, I don't know. It's kind of interesting. It's part of my religious upbringing, even though I'm not part of that church. My faith journey is part of that. I have to accept it. How my faith was put together from different components. Even though I guess mostly I'm evangelical, right? Baptist background, but I got some Presbyterian influences. It's just part of my upbringing, and I think that's important. I think I have fond memories of catechism and Sunday school in the Presbyterian church. So I think it's very interesting. So we see these, just like I saw in the detainee operations in Iraq. You see these dying. When these women, when they had these tattoos, they were hotties, right? These are beautiful women, and now they're elderly and they're wrinkled and their beauty has faded away. But they still have this residue and these ancient traditions going all the way back to the first people, all the way back to Cain. These ancient Arabian customs of tattoos and using the sign of the cross, and these traditions have been maintained to this very day. And now we're seeing it fade away forever, not just among these Assyrians, Tur Abdin, but also the Bedouins. It's kind of funny. I went to Hasaki. You had 30 Assyrian Christian villages. They got cleaned out by ISIS. But I was out there, out in this is eastern Syria. You see a lot of Kurds out there. One of the first things that Kurds want you to know is like, "Hello there, hi, I am a Kurd." Okay, well, good for you, buddy. You're a Kurd. But there are Kurdish people out there. There's also Bedouins, and it's kind of funny. And now we got smartphones. By that time, they had, they probably still do. You're out in the wilderness in tents, and they had satellites watching TV. So the modern world, if you will, coming into the Bedouin encampments. I don't know. I remember I was I was at Palmyra. I came out in the wilderness, and there's all these Bedouin women at Palmyra. But that's another story. My encounter with the Bedouin women at Palmyra. So anyway, check out my book, The Secret of Jabez, because what is it about is God. God is the God of all mankind. We're misreading the Bible, all right? And Peter deals with this. God's no respecter of persons. Paul talks about it in Romans. That we have to oppose. I mean, this new anti-Semitism. We have Tucker Carlson as a shield for the Muslim fanatics and terrorists. It's sad. He's taking money for them, and he's delivering their talking points, and doesn't have anything to say, questioning or critical or negative about Islam at all. Sings Islam's praises. Brings up Islam, has nothing to do with the subject at hand. It's to say how great he thinks Islam is. I mean, he's on the I guess he's getting the gravy train, the Qatari gravy train. But anti-Semitism, this worshiping Jewish people, being overly enamored with Jewish people, you can say that's not good. But hatred of the Jewish people, we just can't go there. Cannot. Jesus says on the first cross, who is he? He is the Son of Man, which means he's the Son of all mankind. He's Redeemer of humanity. He came to save the world. God so loved the world. It's not God just loved the Jewish people. God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son. Whosoever, Jew and Gentile, believeth in him, should not perish but have everlasting life. But Jesus is also the King of the Jews. That's what it says. We see that picture over here. That picture on the wall there is from Tissot, and it shows the prophets holding their scrolls of prophecies, the Old Testament, the Jewish prophets of Israel, that what happened on the cross was foretold. And then he has the Star of David over the cross with the name of the Lord, Yahweh. And we see through the archaeological evidence Aramean kings worshiping Yahweh, Bedouin tribes worshiping Yahweh, earlier than and independently of the Jews. God, Yahweh, is not the unique domain of solely the Jewish people. God called and chose the Jewish people for his sovereign purposes, and we have to acknowledge that. But it's about the redemption of all mankind. It's always been true. This is unknown, but this has always been true. And it's the subject of my book, The Secret of Jabez. And, Islam has led the Arabian people astray. I think this is very interesting. These Arabs they're attacking the name Yahweh. It's like Jesus never called God Yahweh. It's like, well, you don't know that for a certitude. It's like, let me tell you something. When you know what Jesus called God? Called him Allah. That's true, which sounds like Allah. But he also called God Abba, Father. And your false prophet says God is not our Father. Jesus said, I am the Son of God. Jesus said in Aramaic, God is Abba, Father. And that's the name of God according to Jesus, Abba. And you reject that. You reject his prophetic message. And we're calling all men everywhere to repent and to abandon falsehoods. I was thinking about Mar Awa, the Assyrian Church of the East, and he's celebrating the Nicene Creed, which is very important that the Assyrian Church affirms the Nicene Creed. But, what is the Nicene Creed about? Jesus is God incarnate. It's about the Holy Trinity. It's rejecting heresies. Heresies like denial of the Trinity, denial of the sonship of Jesus Christ. Heresies which Islam affirms. Heresies. You had this early Christian heresy of adoptionism, which stated that Jesus was adopted at his baptism by God as his father. But Islam even rejects that because they totally reject the idea that God is our Father and Jesus is the Son of God. So these ancient Christian heresies like adoptionism are affirm spiritual truths that Islam rejects. Right? It's heresy. So as we celebrate 1,700 years of the Nicene Creed, we have to condemn the heresies that it condemned. Heresies which are endorsed, accepted by Islam. So we should pray. I think it's interesting to see these dying customs that connect the Semitic people as a people together. The Berbers are not Semitic, but they're an ancient nomadic people. I think they're distant relatives of the ancient or cousins of the ancient Egyptians. They speak a language that's distant, related to ancient Egyptian, I guess, from that language family. But it's very interesting that these ancient customs go back to the dawn of man, and now we're seeing them fade away. But like I said, the cross, this ancient Arabian symbol, is a sign of God's divine protection and his forgiveness, even though we don't deserve it, his compassion and mercy. So this is the power and the symbol of the cross of Christ, and the prophetic symbol that God was going to make a way to defeat sin and bring salvation to all people through the death of Jesus Christ and his glorious resurrection.